Hello and welcome to News Central TV. I am Adibola Adidwa. Here are stories making the rounds beyond the continent. We begin the news of this hour with the Middle East conflict, where Israel on Monday marks the first anniversary of the October 7 attack by Hamas militant, the deadliest in the country's history, which shocked this nation and sparked the war in Gaza. A series of memorials and rallies took place across the country to mark the attack, while the military said it was striking Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip. President Isaac Herzog began the day with a moment of silence at 6:29 a.m. The moment the attack began at Kibbutz Rim, the site of the Nova Music Festival attacked by militants, where at least 370 people were killed. In the city of Tel Aviv, families of hostages and supporters call for the return of their loved one, while relatives of victims recall their experiences and mourn their losses.
זה עצוב לראות את כל הצעירים האלה שנרצחו, כאילו שבחרו אותם בפנצטה, כולם יפים, כולם אהבו את החיים, כולם באו לשמוח ולרקוד, וגמרו את החיים שלהם בצורה מאוד עצובה. לקחה הודעות לבת שלה שיש אזעקות והם יורים עליהם. הם הצליחו לנסוע עד מפלסים, ושם הרגו שני בחורים שהיו איתם, והיא ובחור נוסף ועוד בחורה התחברו בפרדסים. ואז היא כותבת, לא צריך, אנחנו רואים אותם, ובסדר, אל תדאגו. למעשה הם ראו את החיילים, את הנוח'בה, עם מדים של צה"ל, הם חשבו שהם באים לעזור להם. והם רצחו אותם.
תחושה מאוד קשה. אותה תחושה קשה כמו לפני שנה. אין שום שוני. כל יום שעובר מאוד קשה, והכאב לא דועך.
Let's also tell you that some Palestinian protesters clashed with Israeli forces in Kafr Aqab, north of Jerusalem. Now, this comes on the first anniversary of Hamas' October 7 attack on Israel. In the early hours of October 7, 2023, Hamas launched its attack by firing thousands of rockets towards Israeli border communities. Hamas fighters also stormed across the border and attacked nearly 50 different cities, including kibbutzim communities, army bases, and a Nova Music Festival. The militants killed festival goers and went door to door in farming communities, shooting residents dead in their homes. Meanwhile, around 150 people gathered in India's capital of New Delhi, carrying placards and chanting "Free Palestine" to show solidarity with Palestinians on the anniversary of Hamas' October 7 attack on Israel. Hamas' October 7 attack on Israel resulted in the deaths of 1,205 people, mostly civilians, including hostages killed in captivity. Israel's retaliatory military offensive has killed at least 41,870 people in the Gaza Strip, most of them civilians.
मान करते हैं कि यूएन के रेजोल्यूशंस लागू होने चाहिए, टू स्टेट का जो रेजोल्यूशंस है उसको तुरंत लागू किया जाना चाहिए। हम आज अपने प्रदर्शन के द्वारा विशेषकर भारत सरकार से ये मांग करना चाहते हैं कि भारत सरकार इजराइल के साथ अपने तमाम समझौतों को, अपने व्यापारिक संबंधों को
India was against colonialism, and for the people of Palestine historically, it behoves me to be here to be in solidarity with Palestine and what's happening in Gaza with the Gazan people against violence, because we were always against violence as a nation. So to continue that tradition of anti-violence and for any colonized country, that's why I feel like many youth are here today as well. As the government is abstaining from ceasefire petitions in the UN General Assembly, in the UN.
Palestinians in Jabalia in northern Gaza reflect 1 year after the October 7th attack, Hamas attack, led on Israel that triggered a war that has killed tens of thousands in Gaza and destroyed vast swathes of the territory.
يعني كما هو معروف قطاع غزة تعرض لتدمير شامل في هذه الحرب الغير مسبوقة، الحرب الكونية، حرب الإبادة التي يشنها الاحتلال الإسرائيلي على قطاع غزة لما يقرب من 12 شهر تقريبا عام، وهي مستمرة. هذه الحرب أدت إلى تدمير ما يزيد عن 150 ألف وحدة سكنية بشكل كامل و100 ألف وحدة سكنية بشكل بليغ.
7 أكتوبر هو يوم تاريخي. 7 أكتوبر عمر الشعب الفلسطيني ولا الإسرائيلي راح ينسى. ما زلنا احنا بحاجة لمجاعة عنا، ما زال عنا وباء من أثر ضربات البنية التحتية، نواجه مشكلة في المياه والأدوية والعلاج والمسكن والمشرب.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed on Monday to bring back all hostages still held by Palestinian militants in Gaza as Israel marks the first anniversary of the October 7 attack by Hamas. The Premier's comments came just hours after an Israeli campaign group announced the death of another hostage held in Gaza. The Hostages and Missing Families Forum said Idan Shitivi, 28, was abducted from the site of the Nova Music Festival, and his body is still held in captive by Hamas. Out of 251 people taken hostage that day, 97 are still being held inside the Gaza Strip, including 34 who the Israeli military say are dead. And to talk about the conflict in the Middle East is our senior international correspondent, Adish. Adish, it's been a day of sober reflection in Israel as many reflect on Hamas' assault that unleashed an Israeli offensive on Gaza a year ago. What's the mood like, where you are?
Yeah, Adebola, the mood has been somewhat mixed. The reaction has been mixed indeed. The raid on Israel by Hamas on October 7th, they described it as barbaric heinous. Killing innocent people, just having a good time at a concert is no way to express, their discontent about whatever it is that could be going on with them. On the other hand, what came after that, which is Israel's bombardment in the last 1 year, has left the entire world confused on how to respond to the chaos that is now the Gaza conflict that's now spreading all the way to Lebanon and somewhat even Yemen, as the United States and its allies continue to bomb Yemeni positions there. So right now, people are, even the staunchest supporters of Israel are beginning to question, in terms of, supporting Israel, they're beginning to question their commitment to that support without being questioned about their commitment to international law and human rights. So what people want right now, the mood in general has been that they just want this war, the bombing, to stop. Here in Turkey, thousands of people rallied around the country, including the capital Ankara, calling for peace and showing support for Palestine, as President Erdogan criticized again Israel, saying that it is perpetuating the policy of genocide. Recep Tayyip Erdogan has always been of the idea, has always said that October 7th happened because of Israel's occupation of Palestine and its disregard for the 1947 two-state solution. Also, we saw that Iran and Houthi Yemeni rebels, both of them announced their support for Palestine today. But what has been very interesting in the region today has been that the rest of the Arab community, the leaders, they have not released any statement concerning today's anniversary as of this time that I am on air with you. Perhaps maybe later they will. So that has that's been something in the region that a lot of people have taken note of. Around the world, we saw a lot of people coming out to support Palestine. We saw about 40,000 people marching in support of Palestine in central London, Rome, Paris, Cape Town even, as well as India, as you mentioned earlier, Adebola.
Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today reiterated his vow to bring hostages home What are the chances of that at this stage of the war?
Well, if what has happened so far today is anything to go by, then the answer to that question is either unclear or unknown. And that's because both sides have been on a killing spree. Israel announced that it is still continuing its air and ground invasion of Lebanon, as well as in South Lebanon also. It also stepped up its bombardment of the Gaza Strip, killing 52 Palestinians today, according to Palestinian medics. Hamas on its side also declared that it attacked Tel Aviv today with a missile salvo. Now, using a missile salvo signals Hamas's capability to still continue to attack Israel, even after 1 year of the sort of bombardment we've seen from Israel, denigrating its rank and file as well as its military capability. So all of this put together is happening on a day when even families of the hostages and the victims are calling for their release. There's still 97 hostages in Hamas's custody out of the about 251 people who were kidnapped from that musical festival. So basically, what the challenge with Netanyahu's statement now is that it looks as though the negotiating table has been effectively broken. And if after 1 whole year of fighting intensely like this has not brought home all of the hostages, you can imagine what we expect to see Israel do to forge ahead and bring home the remaining hostages, perhaps without the option of a ceasefire or negotiation, and what that would also mean for those stuck in Gaza at this time, Adebola.
Well, it's 1 year on and nearly 42,000 dead in Gaza, about 1,200 killed in Israel, and now over 2,000 Lebanese murdered. How many more need to die before a ceasefire is agreed and the war ends?
Oh, that's the $1 million question. Not a lot of people know the answer to that. And I say that because as of now, we are no longer hearing, as we used to, the call for ceasefire. We're no longer hearing, as we used to, the call for negotiation. It appears as though the rules of conflict resolution have been denigrated, as well as the boundaries of international conflict have been crossed. All of this is happening and is setting a new precedence for how wars will be fought in the nearest future. What that also means is that diplomacy appears to be weakening, and it appears as though both sides are heading towards the realm of mutual assured destruction. Without sounding too bleak, this appears to be the situation on the ground. And unless something happens as soon as possible, say, for example, with the United Nations trying to get in the way of both of them to get back on the negotiating table. We're seeing an entity like Iran now attacking Israel because it is seen that Hamas is no longer holding forth anymore. The leaders of Hamas have been killed for the most part. So many of the militant soldiers have been killed. So you can see why Iran sees it as a duty to step in. So when you have an actor like Iran like that stepping into this situation, it is broadening. So the answer is it is unclear. It is absolutely unclear at this time.
Well, thank you so much for that details. Adish, Josh, our senior international correspondent there, bringing us up to speed regarding the war, in the Middle East. Thank you very much, Adishewa. After the break, U.S. election Harris to mark first anniversary of October 7th attack. We have details shortly. Join us again. Thank you for staying with us. The news continues in America, where U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris will mark the 1 year of the 7th October attacks in Israel at her Naval Observatory home. The intensifying conflict in the Middle East has posed a significant challenge for Harris as she has assumed leadership of Democratic slate this year. For News Central, Chief International Correspondent Afia Hagen has more.
Vice President Kamala Harris will mark the one-year anniversary of the October 7th attacks in Israel at her Naval Observatory residence, where, along with Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, she'll plant a memorial tree. Second families have traditionally planted trees on the grounds of the Vice President's residence. Monday's planting of a pomegranate tree, which amongst other things represents hope and righteousness in Judaism, will mark the first for Harris and Emhoff whilst they've been at the residence. The escalating violence in the Middle East has been one of the thorniest issues for Harris as she's taken over the Democratic ticket this year. Arab American advocates and leaders have pushed for the Vice President to distance herself from President Joe Biden's Israel policy, including during a meeting in Michigan.
So let's be clear about what should be the priorities of this administration. Get the government back up and running.
Harris has maintained that Israel has a right to defend itself, whilst also acknowledging the heightened emotions surrounding the humanitarian crisis in the region. Harris and Emhoff, who is Jewish, are also expected to deliver remarks to reporters. The Vice President will reflect on October 7th and reaffirm her commitment to the security of Israel and of the Jewish people.
To truly protect reproductive freedoms.
Emhoff will also attend the American Jewish Committee October 7th commemoration in Washington, D.C., where he will recite a prayer. At least 1,200 people were killed in Israel on October 7th, 2023, when more than 1,500 Hamas fighters attacked, and others are still held hostage by Hamas. Israel's subsequent war in Gaza has killed more than 40,000 Palestinians, according to the health ministry there, and has created a dire humanitarian crisis. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagan.
For more on this, I'm joined by our chief international correspondent, Afia Hagan. Afia, we saw former President Donald Trump return to Butler, Pennsylvania this weekend, the scene of the first attempt on his life. I mean, what kind of reception, did he receive?
Well, we're only weeks away from the US election now, and like you so rightly said, we did see Donald Trump this weekend in Butler, Pennsylvania, and it was inevitable, I think, that Trump would want to return to this scene that is now so iconic for him. Now, Butler, Pennsylvania, there was clearly very, very high security, much higher security than at the first rally he attended there. He landed on his Trump plane to the sounds of Top Gun playing. It was all really perfectly choreographed. And he gave a speech, he encouraged his supporters, as usual, to fight, fight, fight. Those are words that he said after he'd been shot, and when you got that iconic shot of him with his fist in the air there. And so what was really, I think, crucial about this particular engagement was that he has returned to the scene that really sort of one of the real shocks of this election campaign, right, which has been not one but two assassination attempts. And of course, he appeared on stage with Elon Musk, and Elon Musk was talking about the need for people to get out and vote, perhaps revealing some Republican fears that if people don't get out and vote, if they don't get out and vote, perhaps the party won't do so well.
Well, we are in the final sprint till election day. Who is on the campaign trail for the candidates?
Well, yes, the candidates are out in force this week, but so are their supporters. Now, Kamala Harris has people on the left and the right pulling for her. We saw her with Liz Cheney last week, a very, very well-known Republican, the daughter of Dick Cheney, who was a Republican vice president. She has been campaigning for Kamala Harris, saying that she is endorsing her for president. We're going to see Barack Obama back out on the road this week. He's going to hold a rally in Pittsburgh on Thursday, and he will also be doing some fundraising, be doing some email campaigning for her as well. Donald Trump this weekend had Elon Musk with him campaigning back in Butler, Pennsylvania. But other than that, apart from some of his usual suspects, and of course, J.D. Vance, you won't really see anybody else pulling for him in that way. He has fewer surrogates that he can turn to. George W. Bush really isn't a vocal supporter. Dick Cheney, we know, isn't either. So it will really be left to Trump and J.D. Vance to be pulling for the party in this last sort of few weeks before the election.
But let's talk a bit about the Hurricane Helene. Do we expect the fallout from that Hurricane Helene, to affect voting?
Well, Hurricane Helene was the most significant hurricane to make landfall since Katrina in 2005. It caused a huge amount of damage. 200 people have died. And so it will affect the campaign, or affect campaigning and the election, in two ways. Number one, how people feel the government responded. Did they get help quickly? Have they been given money to try and get back on their feet after the terrible destruction? And then you've got the actual infrastructure of the election. People being able to vote. Will they have voting machines in place in time? Will the venues that they were going to use to vote be ready for that to happen? And also, to just add to that, you have another named storm that is on the way, Hurricane Milton. Now, that is picking up speed and heading towards Florida. Florida was affected along with North Carolina and parts of Georgia by Hurricane Helene. Now, the effects of Hurricane Milton could be as bad as Helene, if not worse. So that's something we're keeping an eye on over the next couple of days that could also impact the election.
Thank you so much indeed, Afia Hagan, for your insight on this. Away from that, Mexico President Claudia Sheinbaum says that investigations are underway after the mayor of Chilpancingo, a city in southern Mexico, was murdered less than a week after taking office. Chilpancingo Mayor Alejandro Arcos was decapitated and his head left on the hood of a pickup truck. The killing was the latest in a series of deadly attacks on politicians and the violence-plagued Latin American country, and a second in a matter of days in Guerrero State.
Sobre el lamentable suceso del presidente municipal de Chilpancingo, hoy en la mañana se presentó el caso. Se están haciendo las investigaciones necesarias para saber pues cuál fue el motivo y cuál fue el móvil, y por supuesto pues hacer las detenciones correspondientes. Chilpancingo, el municipio, no aparece dentro de los municipios de mayor número de homicidios, pero tiene esta situación en donde hace unos días asesinaron al responsable de seguridad.
Let's also tell you that 2 former employees of a crash were sentenced on Monday in Lille, France, to 10 months in prison with a suspended sentence for violence against children. The former director of the daycare was found guilty of violence against 3 children and was also banned from working in any position involving contact with minors for 3 years. The former nurse, 35-year-old, was found guilty of violence against 8 children and was also banned from working with minors for 5 years.
Les parties civiles que je représente sont naturellement satisfaits, que ce soit passé, de la condamnation qui est intervenue, puisque ce qui compte c'est l'interdiction de principe, et mes clients sont partiellement satisfaits puisqu'ils avaient suggéré au tribunal l'interdiction d'exercer et elle a été reprise. 3 ans pour la directrice et 5 ans pour l'infirmière, et ça correspond parfaitement au dossier, donc les clients vont pouvoir tourner la page et être reconnus comme victimes et que leur préjudice soit établi. Le tribunal a bien marqué le système, qui n'est pas du tout le système qui est décrit dans le livre que vous connaissez tous, juste un système de gens épuisés, de gens qui, c'est très intéressant quand la présidente a dit, elle n'avait pas pu se faire aider, elle ne pouvait pas parler, elle n'avait pas de psychologue, elle pouvait dire à personne sa souffrance, et quand même une violence systémique.
And that's all on Beyond the Continent. Do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch us live on DSTV, channel 422, Star Times, channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Adibola Adeduba. It's bye for now.